This is going to focus on just writing an essay that is purely a rebuttal, okay? So first and foremost, what is a rebuttal argument, right? A rebuttal argument is an argument that is used to poke holes in or dismantle another argument, to pick apart another argument. But it can also discuss the opposing side of an argument and then counter with your own, proposed solution, argument, etc., perspective. Okay. So there are two different types of rebuttal arguments. And I know we've kind of been using these terms interchangeably throughout the semester. So I don't want you to get too like hung up on them. I just want you to know the difference in the strategies here. Okay. So there are two types of rebuttal arguments. There is the refutation and the counter argument. So what we've been working on so far is writing essays that include a counter argument and rebuttal section, right? In which you address a counter argument and then you refute it, okay? Or you give a rebuttal against it. In this case, we're looking at rebuttal arguments as a whole, right? As if that were the whole essay, and the different types or different strategies you can use to craft a rebuttal argument, okay? So the first one is refutation. So in a refutation, you demonstrate the shortcomings of the argument that you wish to discredit. This is when you kind of pick things apart piece by piece. And you may or may not offer a positive claim of your own, right? So you may or may not say, yeah, they're right about this or not, right? Or you may say, this is this counter argument and here is why I believe otherwise, right? Then the counter argument strategy is when you focus on the strengths of the position you support, right? So you don't spend a lot of time picking apart their argument. You just spend more time focusing on why your argument is right as opposed to their argument. Okay, so you spend little time on the specifics of the argument you're countering. All right. So here's what a refutation looks like. So if you were taking the refutation strategy, right, you would look at the main argument and you would craft your refutation in parts. So you would say, okay, the original argument presents this first reason, right? My refutation will attack that first reason and say why that reason is wrong or why it's ineffective or why it's unsuccessful, etc. Okay, then you would move on to their second reason to defend their perspective and you would attack that. Okay, why reason 2 is wrong, right? And then reason 3, etc. If they have presented a third reason, and you would attack that. And then your conclusion would be why their conclusion is wrong. Okay, this is when you start to attack the evidence of something, okay, or the criteria. If you were looking at, say, a definition argument, right, you might say, well, that criteria is invalid because it doesn't actually match the definition you're using. Okay, so for an example here, we have many college students believe that using technology to multitask makes them more productive, believing that studying, texting a friend, and listening to music all at once is an efficient use of their time, right? Because they're doing 3 things at once. So that's the main argument. However, here is the refutation. But research shows that engaging in multiple tasks is distracting, right? Interferes with memory and makes it difficult to switch from one task to the other, making multitaskers less productive overall than people focusing on one task at a time. So here we attacked this argument directly. Many college students believe that using technology to multitask makes them more productive, and here's why, right? So we attacked the reason, right? We didn't attack the idea of multitasking. I mean, we did, but we used that reason to do it, right? So that's where we created this refutation. We chose that reason specifically and we addressed it, rather than just the idea of multitasking with technology in general. We said, hey, listen, doing these other activities actually does this instead, okay? Whoops. Now, we look at a counter argument approach, right? So here's my little diagram here is we just directly address the argument overall, right? We make our own argument that doesn't necessarily address the reasons presented for the original argument. So here, the argument is those who argue for tariffs on goods from China claim that tariffs will protect American manufacturing jobs. Okay, so that's the reason, right? They say, hey, we should have tariffs on goods from China because that will help us protect American manufacturing jobs specifically. Now, if we look at this counter argument, we're going to notice that the counter argument doesn't address protecting American manufacturing jobs at all, right? It just presents alternative benefits to the opposing viewpoint. So here it says, but tariffs are a bad idea because they would increase prices on clothing, furniture, and other consumer goods for everyone and would cause the loss of retailing jobs as well. Okay, so notice we are attacking the argument, right? The argument is the same, tariffs on goods from China. We're still attacking that subject, but we are not addressing the notion or the reason of protecting American manufacturing jobs. Instead, we're presenting our own reasons for why this is a bad idea instead of attacking or picking apart the other argument. Okay, so that's the main distinction or the main difference between refutation and counter argument. Now, that's not to say that you can't use elements of both, but there is typically a main strategy at play, right? Whether you choose to pick apart each reason or whether you choose to present the opposing side, okay? So that's what you want to really think about when you're considering rebuttal essays, okay? So when you build a rebuttal argument, you want to look carefully at the argument you are about to rebuttal, right? Knowing what you agree and disagree with greatly shapes your position, okay? So also acknowledging your agreements may build credibility with your audience as it shows that you understand your opponent makes logical points, okay? And this is where concession comes into play, right? Where you say, hey, they're right about this, right? They make a really good point here when they say the, A, B, and C, but I still know that, X, Y, and Z is true, or X, Y, and Z is more important. Or you could say something like, they make a really good point when they mention A, but B and C are terrible reasons, and here, allow me to pick them apart for you. Okay, so you could do that as well. But it's totally okay to concede when you have gotten to a point that you agree with, okay? So here's when to use what. So you would use the counter argument approach when you generally agree with the claim, right? But you don't think it proposes the right solution to the problem. So that's when you would use a counter argument, when you kind of generally agree and acknowledge the legitimacy of the original argument that's presented. But you have alternative consequences that you believe way higher on the scale of intensity or gravity than the argument they're presenting, okay? You use refutation when you strongly disagree with a position and you are going to want to refute the position. This is when you pick apart someone's argument, okay? So we tend to think of counter arguments always as disagreements, right? Well, we disagree with that other perspective, and that's why we're presenting this counter argument. And that may be true, right? But do we disagree with it because we believe that the reasoning is illogical, or because we believe the reasoning is based on false information, or we believe that the reasoning is not well developed, right? Those would all be refutation examples. Or are we addressing an argument that we kind of generally agree with the stance on, but we know that the situation is bigger than that and we need to address these other parts that may be more important? That would be the counter argument strategy, okay? So your main steps for writing a rebuttal argument are to identify an argument to argue against, obviously, right? So that would be choosing whether or not you're picking out their reasons or whether or not you're addressing their overall claim, okay? Then examine the facts and or assumptions on which the claim is based, okay? And then analyze your potential readers. Obviously, your audience needs to be considered when you are determining how convincing you can be, okay? So that is rebuttal arguments.